Hey there, welcome to Broadcast to Post. I'm Jeff Sengfield, CTO at Keynote Media. This is the show where we interview leaders and experts in the AV, broadcast, and post-production spaces. We're giving you the inside tips to grow your media workflows and business today.
Hi, thank you all for joining. My name is Steve Dupay and I represent Keynote Media in the Utah and Rocky Mountain area. Didn't know we had offices out this way? Well, now you do. In this live stream episode of Broadcast to Post, the Keynote Media team will bring together top engineers in the live production and broadcast industry to discuss unique ways REMI workflows have transformed their live production events. IP video for broadcast has transitioned from a novelty to a necessity, as broadcasters everywhere look for a way to connect a production workflow that allows live content to be captured from a remote location and managed from a central control room or even someone's home office. The industry has responded with a variety of remote capture and control solutions for cameras, video switchers, IFB and intercom, production audio, and even lighting, all utilizing proven video over IP standards like SRT and NDI. We're going to kick this event off by eating our own dog food. That is, actually doing what we're talking about, with a short wow moment. Daniel Maloney from Matrox is joining us remote from Montreal over Monarch Edge, and Scott Sheehan will be joining us from Denver over a LiveU LU800 Flypack. Let's start with Dan. Hi, Dan. I know you've been setting up this remote workflow over Monarch Edge with our TriCaster 2 engineer in Burbank. By the way, you look terrific up there. Can you give me you bet. Tell me a little bit about the setup that you've got going. Can you show us the green screen differential?
Sure. I'll have to ask the TriCaster operator, Matt, to do that for me because I'm back here. I'm just got a camera feed and the production's actually REMI production being done by TriCaster in Burbank. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of the power of the TriCaster and the quality of our signal. We have a single camera here. We're in a small studio, have a green screen here behind, and well, it's maybe a little bit easier to give you an idea of what we've got. I've got a couple of graphics here I'm going to pull up and really show you what we've actually got set up. So what we have here is we're up in Montreal, so real cold. We wish we were in Burbank right now. We just received an inch of frozen rain. However, we are able to send you guys some beautiful green screen footage, as well as a second computer output all the way to your Burbank location. So a bit of details as to what that footage consists of. We've got two channels. They're both set up at 10 megabits per second each. Now the camera is native 1080i, so we're sending you an HDSDI camera is feeding our encoders and not doing any deinterlacing, sending them natively to our decoder in your studios. The computer's output's actually being sent at full 1080p 60. Now the decoder is the one calling us, so we're using a protocol called SRT, and SRT allows us to move video over a public network. It's a robust encrypted type signal, and you guys are calling us for our feeds. We've got 200 milliseconds of latency built in to that SRT feed. That allows for any packet drops to be retransmitted from Burbank or from Montreal to Burbank should the Burbank decoder say I'm missing a packet. So when you include the latency, in fact, we moved it up to 300 milliseconds just to ensure that this would be a crisp signal. Ping time between Montreal and Burbank is around 80 milliseconds. So we wanted to give 250 to 300 milliseconds is what we just adjusted it to. So latency round between glass to glass from encoder all the way to decoder and out is 450 milliseconds.
Got it.
We're using 422 10-bit. If you don't use 422 10-bit, this green screen will really not look that great. We know, TriCasters have great chroma keying capability. Being able to send you this high quality footage ensures that I don't look too green along the outside of my hair and my shoulders. So that's the details.
Excellent. Well, now that it's all set up, could you give us some bullet points on why people would need to use Monarch Edge for their remote production?
In my hands here, I have two of the models that we promote, the S1 and the D4 decoder, which is very similar to our identical to our encoder from a hardware perspective. 4 SDI inputs or outputs, Genlock, and this, in case of the S1, bi-directional input and output. It's future-proof. We have ST2110, and again, Tally talkback connectivity, redundant network jacks in there as well. You can have command and control on one device with media on the other, or just have redundant streams coming out of both. So really quite a compact 2 units in a single rack, device. So there you have it. So lastly, I'd like to mention that on our own website, I did quite a lot of geeky, tests, and you guys want to understand and see how low latency, open internet transport can happen, what the latencies are, the robustness of it. I'd encourage you to take a look at the couple of links that we provided here. In addition, there's a great webinar that we did to enhance REMI workflows using IP KVMs. This is where you have not only remote contribution with the encoders and decoders, but you also have remote operators, so that instead of being in Burbank, Matt could be somewhere in San Francisco operating his TriCaster that's located in Burbank while I'm contributing from Montreal. So again, extra flexibility when it comes to remote production, remote operation.
Awesome. I can certainly see the value in this product. I know personally we've had sports stadiums using this to get really clean and stable signals from anywhere in their arena to a remote production center. And the overall feedback that we've gotten is that it's incredibly reliable. All right. Thanks, Dan.
Very welcome. Thank you, Steve.
All right. We are now joined by Scott Sheehan from LiveU in Denver, Colorado. Scott, I know you've been in the background configuring your LiveU with our TC2. What did the setup look like?
Hey, Steve, thanks for having me. Yeah, coming from Denver, 0-degree weather here outside. I'm sitting inside my office. All I have here is a LiveU backpack. We call it a field unit, LU800. I've got a little Sony camera today feeding via an HDMI input into the unit. And that's it on this end. And then this is traveling over 6 modems. And the signal's coming to Keycode there in Burbank and hitting our LU2000 decoder server, which is hooked up in your network. and then it outputs hitting, I believe, your TriCaster switcher. You could confirm that for me, Steve. Hitting in the TriCaster, and that's how we are connecting, completely remote.
Excellent. Okay, now I'm going to ask you the same thing. Why would people need LiveU?
Well, they would need LiveU for, interestingly enough, exactly what we're doing here today. So, depending upon whether it's a news story, a sports event, maybe a corporate event, all you need to do is do exactly what I have here. Is just a little field pack and a LiveU camera, and you've got complete remote video production where we can go or provide video from anywhere, really at any time, and bring it back remotely to the confines of the 70-degree weather you've got there in California versus the 0-degree weather I got here in Colorado. But point being is we can go anywhere at any time and bring that video back to where it can be produced, output, and then sent out SDI to a cable head end, produced, put up on a big live TV, a video wall, or sent RTMP to do over the top. Going online video, but essentially being able to take video, bring it to another location, 10 miles, 100 miles, 1,000 miles away, and then let you produce it and output it.
That is so cool. It truly does amaze me that the use cases that I've seen for LiveU, we've seen everything from sporting events like marathons to the Super Bowl, or just about any time you need to have a remote guest interview to look like it's top notch. It's really just.
Let me interrupt you there for a minute. Yeah, you mentioned Super Bowl. And if I'm sure so many people watched it, I'm sure you were one of them, Steve. But the flyover was done with recorded from the ground by a LiveU. There was an in-camera shot, or an in-plane shot that they were transmitting to a receiver on the ground, and that receiver was plugged into a LiveU. So NBC was essentially getting that in-camera video from a LiveU sitting on the ground at the Super Bowl. And there was actually a really cool 30-minute video that the United States Air Force Public Affairs Agency did behind the scenes. It's on YouTube Live, by the way, but you can Google it. And they used LiveU for that as well. They were out in the hangar, they were out in the tarmac, they were all over the place with a LiveU, but producing it from a studio.
Fantastic stuff, Scott. So tell me a little bit about what else it can do. Tell me how it handles tally, delay, the IP pipe, some of those kinds of things.
Yeah, so, the idea here is that to do remote video production, you want to emulate as much as you possibly can what you can do in a studio. So how do you do that? Well, when you're in a studio, you can talk to people. When you're in a studio, you might have PTZ camera, or you need to control color and white balance over a CCU. You might need to send, video to a producer, via video return. So we have a series of services, licenses, or we call them licenses, but services that essentially allow you to, from the studio, have two-way audio communications over Audio Connect, for example. I could have an earpiece in my ear, connected to the LU600, and maybe somebody's talking to me, giving me a question in my ear, might it be? So we can have two-way audio comms. Maybe you want to have a 2 or a 3 camera shoot, which the LU800 can do, by the way. We could take up to 4 camera feeds into a single LU800. So while I'm on this camera, you might have a PTZ camera shooting something to the left of me, the right of me, or maybe on top of me, whatever, a wide angle shot. And you don't have it, you want to, it's a cost effective thing to not have multiple camera persons in the field. You can actually, over something we call IP pipe, make a long distance connection between your joystick PTZ camera controller there in the studio and drive the camera out here in the field, or put a CCU on my camera and actually control the white balance, the color, etc., etc. So you can do all the things that you can do from a studio as if you were right here next to me. In addition, if I do have 3 or 4 cameras, I got to know whether to look right or look left, which camera's now on me. Tally. I mean, everybody knows what tally light is, but you can actually control those remotely from the studio. So, with a tally controller kit. Now, I might be sitting here and, in a news or maybe some sort of a pre-scripted event where you don't want me to talk freely and you want me to basically recite what you want to be said. You could send me teleprompter. So LiveU has a product called Video Return. I could be sitting here and you could be feeding me teleprompter, and I could be, essentially reading from a teleprompter or seeing the program feed that you're producing back there called Video Return. So video back to the field, two-way audio communications, camera control, tally, all of these different features that essentially allow for a complete remote video, we like to call it at-home production, that essentially allows you to keep all the heavy-duty equipment back there in the studio, and all I need out here is this LiveU backpack and a camera.
Wow, it's just amazingly flexible and a reliable fix for a lot of live events. Excellent, thank you. All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break and return with our panel of experts.
Thanks, Steve.
Keycode Media. Daily broadcast post-production. Keeping you ahead in technology.
All right, let's introduce the panel today. We have two production pros here, and we're going to get their real-world experience with REMI workflows. Will Johnson at Meyer Pro. With over 20 years experience in the production industry, including concert touring, house of worship, remote television, and corporate productions, Will uses his knowledge of audio, video, lighting, networking, and show flow to create robust systems tailored specifically for each client. Always curious and forward-thinking, he is always looking for new technology to make productions easier and increase capability and efficiency. Brett Collins, founder of BC Live Production. Brett is a pioneer and leader in the field of producing live events and webcasts. In 2013, he took his success and turned it into an amazing company, BC Live Productions. One of the best kept secrets in the industry, BC Live carries a wide selection of specialized live streaming production equipment, including bonded cell, wireless video, switchers, audio consoles, intercom, and general live production equipment, all available for rent. They also have an all-star bench of talented production people that help some of the largest television broadcasters and brands to deliver exceptional video experiences. All right, guys, let's jump to the questions. Appreciate you guys being here. We keep hearing words like REMI, remote production, at home, all these marketing buzzwords. Do they all mean the same thing, or is there a nuance to them? Will?
I think REMI and remote production are kind of the same thing. We were talking earlier about REMI. What REMI stands for isn't exactly remote production, but they kind of mean the same thing. But then when you get into talking at home, there is definitely a nuance there where you're talking about operators being spread in different locations. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree with that. And then there's also, I mean, it's such a hybrid world now, right? So we have, there's some pieces of the operation are at home, some of them are in studio, and some of them are, remotely on set.
Okay. Do you have maybe some examples of connecting stuff together to accomplish some of those?
I have some colleagues that were last year were working with EA Sports, where they were trying to figure out, how do we do these same competitions that we've been doing in person? How do we do them not in person? And so they were building teams to leverage like vMix in the cloud. And so you'd have an audio mixer in San Francisco and a TD in Seattle, and then your teams would be wherever they were, and all leveraging, through the cloud that way.
Okay.
Yeah, we've done a variety magazine, Red Carpet, where obviously there's the onset red carpet team, and then there's we were switching everything at our REMI studio, but then also we have prompter, audio are all from their separate homes. So that's kind of where that hybrid at home and remote production happens.
Are there some complexities to doing that you need to pay attention to?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think particularly when you think about mixing audio remotely, obviously latency is a huge thing. So, there's a tool called Audio Movers, which is, super low latency, high fidelity audio that we've been using, so that our A1 is able to mix from there. And then we use, it's a combination of different tools, but Millicast is one of them that we will send our multi-view and program back to our remote operators so that they can view in real time.
I guess that kind of brings up the point that, you know, if you're going to pull this off successfully, you can't obviously leave things to the last minute. You have to kind of plan ahead a little bit more. Are there some things that you guys go, some checklists that you have for prepping shows that are going to have remote elements? And can you maybe identify some of the gotchas that people should be aware of?
I think a lot of the pre-planning is definitely very important. I think a lot of people doing tech checks. We have a remote show that we do on a weekly basis where there's multiple venues and we're creating a show and sending it out. And we try to say, you know, hey, the day before you have to set everything up and you have to connect and we have to make sure we can see audio and video and hear all this stuff. And a lot of people don't understand how important that is to do it ahead of time and not to show up 10 minutes ahead and just kind of wing it. There's all kinds of, you know, connection issues in your streams and bandwidth issues. What happens if the internet was fine yesterday but not today? I was having a conversation yesterday with when I was doing remote sports, you know, for ESPN, ABC, all those guys. We could be parked in the same city for multiple days doing baseball games. Every single day, you do a tech fax, you do a transmission fax, you check everything every single day, and you do it in enough time in advance that if there's a problem, you have time to fix it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. You gotta not think that day to day it's always going to be the same. You got to plan each day and allot yourself some time to do those double checks. What do you think, Will? Are there some things that that make it work for you?
In terms of planning ahead of time? Yeah. So we do a lot of, we have checklists of specs. Okay, well, it's a remote venue. You need to have internet. It needs to be a certain bandwidth. You know, how are we connecting this? And a lot of times we'll do, we'll set up packages and send those. And so we'll test those packages in-house and then send them out. So then if there is an issue, it's generally just a localized issue. It's not like a piece of gear is having a problem. And then there's lots of planning meetings, Teams, Zoom, whatnot. There's lots of planning meetings, information going back and forth, but way in advance.
Brett, you've obviously done a lot of remote production. What are the things that you find are the most critical to pay close attention to?
Well, I mean, I think that Will hit it on the head. Obviously, internet is a huge one. We try and send out redundancy where possible, just in case. I mean, you know, obviously, one of the big things that we face in the remote production, at-home production age is that we're dealing with consumer internet a lot of the time, and it's shared, and it's, you know, it's not, you know, it's there to provide a service, but it's not going to have the same level of attention as, you know, your commercial and your dedicated enterprise services. So, you know, where possible, we'll try and send out either a bonded cell backup or something to try and bolster the connection just in case there's any issues. But certainly, you know, doing the tech checks ahead of time, you know, it does change from day to day. You know, when we're doing our tech checks, you might want to also pay attention to what time of day you're doing things, because if it's not the same time of day, then you're going to have different lighting conditions, different, you know, maybe there's, you know, gardening happening the next day. It's just, you know, it's paying attention to all those things from your talent's point of view as well, and asking those right questions to make sure that you just minimize the possibility of failure.
Right. So while lots of the higher end productions are streaming events, there seems to be a growing use of Zoom, Teams, et cetera. While we use those for maybe some of the pre-production stuff, we're still seeing clients that want to do bigger events using Zoom. Are there some things that you're doing to make those kinds of productions work well? Improvements to Zoom over time, you know, maybe going to Zoom Pro?
Yeah, I mean, Zoom Pro at 1080, it looks really good. I'll be honest with you. There's, you know, I think that as we see a lot of the higher end video transmission technologies lower their latency, like, you know, SRT gets pretty low. I think it all comes down to what the use case is. You know, if we're talking about handing off, like say, in a red carpet setting, or you're throwing to somebody, then I think it makes a lot of sense to use as high quality transmission as you can, like something like an SRT feed. 25 megs is going to look amazing. However, like we're doing, for instance, a game show at the moment where the host is in New York City and the contestants are in LA, and it's comedic. It's a lot of back and forth, and for those sort of things, latency is more important than getting that same level of video quality. So for those sort of things, Zoom is amazing. And then for that instance, we're also recording. It's live to tape. We're not going live. So we have the benefit of being able to time code sync things, with GPS time code, and then we're recording the original video to decks at the host site, so that in post they can just drop that in and lay back in the high quality video. So those sort of things are super useful.
Okay, you've mentioned some protocols here. Maybe if you could both spend a few minutes and tell us what protocols you find are most effective for particular applications, and how you make some that maybe have some additional challenges, how you make them work.
We use a lot of SRT for what we do. We find a lot of the encoders and decoders that we use, Matrox, High Visions, that kind of thing, they're all using SRT. And for our single acquisition stuff, that's kind of what we do. This cheerleading show that we do, it's all SRT feeds coming in from Teradex into a vMix rig, and so that works really well because it's easy. It works easier. There's a little bit less once you get it set up. There's a little bit less to do on the remote side. Whereas with RTMP, you can have all kinds of like, oh, did you not put this in right? What about that? So, but we also find that most of the streaming providers still want an RTMP feed. So you have, it's not like you're going to go all SRT or all RTMP. You're going to be using different ones for different places. But I think for us, mostly we're moving toward SRT mostly.
Okay, that's good to know. Brett, what about you? Yeah, you have a favorite?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of SRT as well. We use that for a lot of different purposes, and we similarly have High Visions. We also have a lot of elemental channels as well that we use for outbound. We use a lot of NDI. I think that we had one of the things is obviously the networking side of things becomes so incredibly important. Networking engineering is hugely important as you ramp up the use of a lot of these high bandwidth video protocols. So NDI gets pretty heavy once you add a lot of feeds in. So looking at the structure of your network and looking at things like potentially multicasting, so that you're not pulling, if you're pulling one feed, you're not doubling, tripling, and multiplying that for every destination you're sending it to. I think that the network engineering part of it is hugely important. And but from a technology standpoint, NDI is amazing because of the ancillary data you can send over it, right? So tally, comms, all the rest of it. It's very, very versatile.
Great. You both have mentioned quite a bit about networking. What would you say is maybe Will, you can take the first crack at this one. What do you think the engineer needs to be paying attention to networking skill wise? There's some specific things that they need to get more up to speed on than in your experience?
I think, yeah, I mean, I think you have to start. Everything is moving IP, whether it be the signals moving IP or the control is moving IP. Everything is kind of moving that way. And so whereas years ago, I was in a truck and we would have, 7 different networks. The switcher would have its own network with a dumb switch, and the router would have its own network with a dumb switch. Well, now you're getting past dumb switches. You're getting into like converged networks with VLANs, and you're having to do inter VLAN routing so that your control computer can reach out to the router or reach out to this. And I think learning as much as you can about basic networking, but also that second layer of networking, learning about VLANs and routing, control, how multicasting, affects your network. So that's one of the big things with VLANs is your multicasting. That's why Dante, for instance, has to be or wants to be on its own network, because there's all kinds of multicasting happening.
Right.
Not to mention PTP, time and reference and all that. So it all plays into itself, and they can affect each other or get in each other's way. I mean, just think about a busy interstate. I drove to work today on I-5, and it's 4 lanes wide and just packed with cars. And so to alleviate some of that, if you create different VLANs, you create different highways, and then all that traffic has more space to move.
Right.
So
Right.
it gets, you have to start thinking about that and looking at what switches you're buying, what routers you're buying. You can't just go, off the shelf as easily.
Right. Yeah. That maybe that will you. Are there some switches that you found work best for you?
We are getting into the Netgear 4300 M4300 series, which is that's kind of their professional series that's made for video over IP and audio over IP work. So they've got some really cool stuff built in. They're going to have a new GUI that they're eventually going to come out with, is where you can say what's going to be on this network. Oh, that's going to be NDI, or that's going to be this, and it will automatically things within the switch to be what's best for that. Now there's some restrictions there too. If you're talking about 2110 video, which might be above what we're talking about today, but that is another layer that the M4300s might not be so good at on a bigger scale. So you'd have to go with an Arista or Cisco, but of course Cisco is the standard. Everyone loves Cisco, but we've been going with Netgear personally. Okay.
Brett, you mentioned earlier that you kind of back up your systems with Flypacks and doing some other bonded cellular type of things. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're using Flypacks, what they enable you to do for your productions?
Are you referring to the bonded cell stuff we're talking about? Yeah, absolutely. We've used a lot of bonded cell in the past. We have a number of LiveU units that we use. We've also used from devices from Teradek, from TVU. There's a number of different ones out there. For specifically the things that I was just talking about, we actually use PEP waves, because we're using that really for its internet backup more than anything else. And I think that where we've used LiveU for a lot of video backhaul and transmission, we've tended to, if we need to send backup internet, we use the PEP wave devices, which are specifically for bonding for straight internet, and they're really good for creating VPN tunnels if you want to do device control and things like that. So for example, the game show I was just talking about before, we're able to not only use that as a backup for the internet, but also use it for controlling PTZ cameras, for rolling records and doing all that sort of additional stuff that takes some of the pressure off the remote engineer. I mean, there's so many places that we've used these sort of things, because it became standard really for us to send that out for any of the remote kits that we're sending out, particularly during the pandemic, where we were a lot of a lot of talent that didn't really have setups, we would be sending out, like for instance, we did actually a show with Keycode for RuPaul's Drag Race when they were in the middle of their season when the pandemic hit, and they needed a way to finish out the show. So we ended up sending out kits to every one of their contestants, so they were able to actually compete, with a standardized kit. So not every contestant was, advantaged or disadvantaged based on their, whatever gear they had. And for each one of those, we send out a bonded cell, unit to back up their internet.
Cool. I'm glad you mentioned PTZ and Tally and some of those kinds of things. How critical is that to have as part of that overall system now for a REMI production?
I think for a full REMI, I think it's really important to have that Tally. And if you're using PTZs, yeah, your remote control. But it depends on whether do you want, is it easier to have the operator on site or not? I know in Brett's case, it was easier to have the operator remote because they didn't have someone in New York, for instance, to do that. But I think it's really important. I was doing a few years ago when ESPN was starting to really kind of dip their toes in REMI production. They would send out a kit that had a VPN router, and it had an RTS Arvon card to go in my Arvon frame or my Atom frame. It would have a DNS GPI box. And then I would hook all that up. And so all of a sudden we have 16 channels of intercom between us and them. And then I have tallies, and we have internet, we have file transfer, all that. And so all of a sudden it doesn't really feel that different to certain people. Now, of course, there's latency. Latency is a big deal for tallies. The latency for a tally coming across the internet is instantaneous, whereas your stream is a second behind. So the camera operators had to remember, okay, when my tally goes out, keep tracking for another 2 seconds before I whip pan around to something else. But all that is workable, and that's where the tech checks come in and all the preparation and testing comes in. But having that kind of connectivity and communication ability is key to making it not feel any different.
And Will, I'd add to that too that it's as well as whether or not you have the people on site available to go out. So a lot of the times for these remote shows, we're going to talents' houses, right? And they don't want a lot of engineers on site. So yeah. For those sort of instances, the more that you can remote, like we're painting cameras as well remotely, it's just the more that you can take offsite, the more comfortable talent's going to be as well, particularly these times.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's one of the things, like with the LiveU and with the Matrox kinds of solutions, they're incorporating more of that functionality that you've mentioned, that you used to have disparate boxes that you would configure to do remote production. So you'd have a plethora of things to manage. And now you've got solutions from both LiveU and Matrox and others that allow you to integrate that functionality. Is that more advantageous, or are there some complications to using those kinds of tools? Seems to me like, as I've used those kinds of things, that it's made my productions a little simpler, because I don't have so many different connections I got to make. I get it set up once in the Flypack in the shop, and then I'm able to take it out and make it happen.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the good things about that is that you don't, those features exist, but if you're starting out, you don't have to use them all, right? It's not like the core functionality is there, and you can add those things. The more information, the more control that you can have either at home or at your REMI studio, the better. So I'm all on board for those features getting added.
Great. Well, and that kind of leads into the next topic is, what's missing? What do we need to look forward to, or encourage our, our discussion earlier was, what manufacturers need to pay attention to in terms of keeping the products agile and moving forward to support the market. What are the things that you see we need to be paying attention to going forward?
I think interoperability is a big one. You and I were talking about this earlier. Just interoperability between different devices. For instance, in the Tally world, you have the TSL Tally protocol, and a lot of people are picking that up, whereas everyone used to have like their own kind of Tally protocol. So in all these communication protocols, if they can be interoperable and talk to each other, then that gives you flexibility to figure out what's the right product for the right situation, but not have to go out of your way to have it all work together.
Good points. Brett, what do you think? There's some things that you see that maybe the manufacturers who might be listening that they could maybe pay a little attention to.
I totally agree with what Will said there. The interoperability is important. I mean, to me, like there seems like there's always going to be multiple standards. Just obviously we'd love more standardization because everything just works a lot nicer together. I think that we don't see this. A lot of the things that we have wanted, I think that have been achievable just by using different tools. So I think bringing some of those things together into into the same boxes would be helpful. We were talking about this earlier as well. The more that it's a double-edged sword, right? Because the more that you bring into one box, the more dependent you are on that box, and if it goes down, you're in trouble. So, yeah, I think as these platforms are being developed, just having an eye towards redundancy would be a big thing, and so that if something does fail, there's an easy way for it to fail over, and it doesn't ruin your production.
Excellent. I got one more on this future question, and then we're going to go to the attendees and get some questions from the audience. What do you see the impact of 5G being?
Brett?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be huge. If the promise is delivered, until that time, I think it's it is what it is. But the promise of 5G is absolutely game changing. Mm-hmm. It's at the moment, I think we're in a place where, through careful production planning, for instance, we can have someone with a cell phone be an actual camera on a show, as long as we really plan that out and we have specific ways to ingest that wirelessly. I think with 5G, any cell phone can become a camera for, a high resolution camera for a production. So you think about all the possibilities that has, whereas I know that for instance, for when we did the RuPaul thing, we had one of their final challenges was this lip sync thing where we were pulling in a cell phone with the LiveU app on it, and we're pulling that into our LiveU ingest servers back at the studio. That took some finagling and tech checking and just really trying to dial that in. Worked great, but I think as 5G rolls out, like those sort of things, it's going to be super easy to do. So as long as, I mean, to me, it's mind-boggling how many antennas would be required to make that happen, since it's such a short-range technology. But they're rolling it out, so I think if it does happen, it's going to change the game.
I think I agree with you. I think it's definitely a game changer moving forward if they deliver on the promise. I think at the same time, though, kind of my mantra has always been, whenever possible, use a wired connection. I think that's one of my biggest frustrations in the consumer market, with like Wi-Fi at home, is like you buy these devices and they don't even have a wired connection anymore. They just assume you're going to be Wi-Fi, and everything's Wi-Fi, and there's we've all been to the buildings where there's 47 Wi-Fi networks, and and so I think there will always be a place for wireless for convenience sake, for certain things, and 5G can make that much more reliable and that much more high, because the high bandwidth, you can do these 4K feeds and such, but also at the same time not necessarily relying on it as your for everything. You would want to pay attention to that as well.
I think that's a really good point, is keep your options open. Remote production is not going away at all, even as our environment and the pandemic ends and things change. To me, I think we've learned some lessons that we can do a whole lot more. And of course, there's all that T&E stuff that we can save on the production side, but it gives us a lot more flexibility. So I see it's just going to keep growing in terms of its availability and the demand for it, because it's so powerful. We've got a couple of questions here from the audience that I think maybe we want to dive into. First one I've got here is from Mainstream Media. They want to know, what's your favorite piece of gear in your remote setup right now? What is your go-to thing?
My favorite piece of gear, just because it's relatively new to us and it's changing our workflows, is the ROS Ultrix router and switcher system, and just a lot of the ROS products. I mean, we're heavy into ROS switchers, and now with their Ultrix router, where you can do 12G. We're doing everything we purchase now, with very limited exceptions, is 12G 4K capable. We're kind of staying away from the IP workflow right now, and staying with 12G SDI, but we want everything to be 12G capable, because we're doing more and more 4K. So the raw stuff, it's natively everything is 4K. So you don't lose channels, and you can de-embed and embed, and you can move stuff around. It's just, and you have multi-viewers with 100 pips, which, like, who needs 100 pips on a multi-viewer? So I think that's my favorite piece of gear right now. Cool.
Brett, what about you? Do you have something that makes your remote production work easier, a breeze? I wouldn't say a breeze, but maybe makes it a little less stressful, more enjoyable.
Will, I do love ROS. We have several ROS switchers, but I will say, just for the versatility and flexibility, I love our TC2. The new tech stuff is, I know it's more on, they've leaned very heavily into IP and NDI, which, to start with, kind of made me a little nervous. But, as the reliability increases, there's so much you can do on those TriCasters. That's just amazing to me. But I will say, actually, my favorite little piece of gear is just the Decimator MD Cross. That thing has saved my bacon on so many shows, because it's just, it's like a little throw-down box. You can transcode your video. It tells you exactly what's going on. You've got bars and tone generator. I love that little thing.
Yeah, we have a lot of those. They're great. They're starting to replace all of our converters, like, because they can just, it's a Swiss Army knife. You just
absolutely
have a pile of converters. Yeah.
Excellent.
I was not paid by Decimator for this.
Yeah, I was going to say, all these, we love all these products. Matt has a question for us here that he's asking, is there any chart or guide that you use when considering network latency, et cetera, like kind of a help sheet that you could send out to a crew to help them to make sure they've got things set up the right way, or to look for where the gotchas might be?
Brett, you want to take crack at that?
Do we have one that we've built for our purposes? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, or if you found one online. I kind of have like a little checklist that I go through to check for latency, to check for quality service points, some things like that to use. Do you guys use any tools like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have some sort of rough guides, but all the producers have their own kind of set of checks that they'll do. So I think that it really comes down to your team, because there's so many different things, right? So there's audio checks, video checks, network checks, like all these things are. I don't have a one master checklist. I think I kind of lean on my department heads to do their own checks.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think the impact is going to be? This is one from Nick. What do you think the impact is going to be on freelancers as we go to more and more remote production?
I think potentially freelancers might have to get into owning more, some specific equipments. There's a lot of freelancers I know, a lot of A1s that, they have their own mics, they have their own this, and they rent them, out of it because they prefer that, I think. But like A2s generally will show up with their tools and, you provide the equipment. But if you're sending, like you said, for that RuPaul thing, if you're sending one person with, hey, you're a freelancer, I need you to go take this kit of gear and go to this person's house. I think they might have to carry some Swiss Army knife kind of stuff just in case. So there may be some tools, some converters, some stuff like that they might need. Or it could go, fully the other way, and maybe they build the whole kit themselves and you hire them and the whole kit. It depends on which way you want to take that. And I think that's going to be nuanced in the different realms of sports or entertainment or corporate or whatnot.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it creates new opportunities, for people, as you said. If people want to invest in their own gear and make sure that they have their internet bases covered, then there's a new world really of at-home production that freelancers can get into. And we've certainly hired a number of them for shows that we're doing. Obviously, again, it's what's so important to us is reliability of connection. So a lot of testing is really important, and we would need to do that with anyone that we're vetting for an at-home freelance position. But I think that opportunity exists, and I don't really see it as being a negative thing in any of the freelance world. I think that potentially there's as more things move towards remote, or as we start seeing a lot of the hybrid things, there's still going to be the venue's still going to need places. Wherever there's an event, there's still going to need crew there. There's going to be, wherever there's a REMI studio, you still need crew to operate it. And, even though these positions, in some ways can be consolidated, when we're talking about bigger shows, it still makes the most sense to us to have people dedicated to the same positions that you would normally have them in production. I don't think that that's going away. So I wouldn't be too concerned about it. I think that there's, if anything, new and more opportunities.
Great. It really kind of leads to another question that I would have is, what would you say to a freelancer who wanted to become more valuable to you? What additional skills would he need to have to make him more valuable to you in doing a remote production versus a traditional production?
Learn networking.
That's kind of what I was looking for. So,
I think I was going to say.
Yeah. So the guy that knows his craft in terms of being a V1 and A1, but can also troubleshoot the network for you. He's the guy that you're going to want to have.
Yeah, because it's about learning networking, learning protocols, learning the gotchas, learning this and that. This encoder is not working right. Well, log in and learning about SRT and RTMP and learning all the different protocols so you know how to help troubleshoot them, and that can be extremely valuable.
Right.
Exactly. And then the devices that you're using have their own network setups. So just knowing that stuff so that you don't become the cause of a network problem, because that's the thing, one device on a network can mess things up. So, obviously in a larger system, there's going to be dedicated engineers, but the more that you can know about your world and how that interfaces with the networks of the other worlds, then the more valuable that is.
Right. Well, I think you've also addressed another question here that came up is do you think that the nature of events has permanently changed? Are they going to stay in this remote production environment that we've been in for quite a while? Or do you see more and larger on-site crews, or is it just going to be a hybrid of it?
I think I don't think it's ever going to go fully back to the way it was. I think there will always be, where there can be remote, there will be remote, because there's cost savings to that. A lot of it comes down to money. For years, even pre-pandemic, the major networks were, like I said, dipping their toe in the water of what can we get away with? Like what can we have salaried staff people back at the hub that are replay operators, audio people, video shaders, whatnot, and how can we integrate that out in the field so that we don't have to fly those people across the country, or hire, spend more money hiring freelancers there. And like Brett said, like talking about freelancers, there's a new opportunity. I know as this REMI was coming on board, all the freelancers I knew were freaking out, and I always used to say, if you're outside the truck, you're safe. If you're inside the truck, start looking. But if you embrace it and go, this is happening, I'm not going to stop it. You can find new opportunities, learn networking, and then, maybe, invest in some gear and whatnot, so you can mix from home, or, that you kind of lean into it, basically.
I like that, lean into it. It's a great way to position it. There was a question that came up about the 5G. The question is when we say if they delivered on the promise, are you referring to the actual 20 gigabit data rate, or is it the availability of towers where they're located, or maybe a combination of both?
All of it.
I think it's both, totally both. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
and that's
because it is such short range, in everything we've heard about it, such short range. Someone once said, for this to work in an urban environment, there's going to have to be, panels on every rooftop, literally everywhere. And so, it's coverage, it's speed, it's the same thing. I mean, you go to an NFL stadium and you're like, man, I've got 5 bars, but I can't check a website. Like, you have plenty of signal, but there's so much congestion there. So does that super high bandwidth, does that alleviate congestion, or does it create more because people are streaming stuff and the streaming providers automatically go, oh, you have 20 megabit connection, you can watch the 4K feed. Well, like they automatically adjust. So is there going to be any difference at all? It's kind of waiting to be seen.
I mean, I think about that too, just the sheer network capacity required. Like, if we're talking about the freeway analogy, and you have one car can suddenly take up 10 lanes, how big does your freeway need to be now?
Yep, that's a great way of looking at it.
Maybe
one last. Go ahead.
Because on corporate networks, on corporate Wi-Fi, they bandwidth limit each person, but on 5G, you're just getting it, and they're unless they're going to clamp down on you,
they'll have to throttle it.
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be some kind of prioritization, but we'll have to see how that fleshes out. Kind of one last question. Do you feel like this move to remote production has enhanced your business, or has it slowed you down? How do you think that's been going for you, and where do you see the future on that part of it?
For us, we lost a little bit of, obviously the in-person stuff went away when the pandemic hit, but we had already been doing remote production. We have some, corporate multinational clients that have offices around the world. So, for town halls and, for mergers and acquisitions and things like that, we were already doing a lot of that stuff. So when this hit, that part of the business exploded. And I touch wood, that was an amazing thing for us, that we were actually able to thrive in that environment. But I think, as we talked about before, it's not going away. It was already on the increase, and it forced our hands globally to sort of start to embrace more of the remote production thing. I think that there's a lot more production that will happen now because of it, because it's a lot more accessible. So, I think that the same large events that have always happened will need to still happen. And I think that a lot more businesses, personalities are already doing more streaming because of the accessibility and availability. So I think that it's just on the rise still.
Excellent. Will, any final thoughts?
I mean, no, we're the same way as Brett. I mean, when the pandemic hit, all of our live events went away, but then other clients still had to do events. Microsoft's a big client of ours, and they, all these conferences that they would do, developer conferences, all this stuff, they still had to do them. So they were like, well, let's pivot and figure out how to do it. And so that side, similarly to Brett, it just exploded for us. And so, and now it's starting to tame back as things open up, as more live events are starting to happen. Things are taming back the other way, but it's opened up new opportunities for us to be able to provide a service to other people.
Excellent. Well, I'd like to thank both you and Brett for joining us, Will, and to all of our participants and those that have been watching. We appreciate your time and hope this has been of value to you, and we look forward to talking with you again soon. Thanks all.
Yeah,
Thanks so much.
Thanks for watching Broadcast to Post. Please make sure to subscribe to the podcast to receive future episodes. Follow Keycode Media on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram to receive news on additional AV, broadcast, and post-production technology content. See you next time, folks.